Hello, this is Cuckoo Town and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Wyatt. Our intention here is to serve you up a delicious smorgasbord of strange, all that weird stuff that we know you love too. With the assistance of my co-host, Janice, and occasional guests, we'll also be delving deeply into an indefinable place, a liminal space, where high strangeness meets high creativity. The place where the magic happens, where the spark that gives us inspiration abides, and the muse resides. Therefore, art, music, literature, especially weird fiction, film, history and folklore will be the side dishes on our menu. Welcome to Cuckoo Town.
And this is what I played for him.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo until the 4th day of July. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Cuckoo Town, which I've entitled, If That House Isn't Haunted, It Damn Well Should Be. Spoiler alert, it is. Today we have a fascinating conversation for you to enjoy, but before we play you that, I will just give you a brief background to this episode. At the end of August, we drove down to a quiet Midwest town that we both love. It's less than an hour away from us and it's always a good day out. So we parked the car in a different spot this time, and when I got out of the car, I was immediately and hugely impressed by a 3-story house which was sat on a higher elevation from us just across the street. I was surprised I'd never noticed it before, really. At the time, I estimated it to be around 150 years old, which turned out to be reasonably accurate. It was in excellent condition, but still for me it gave out a slightly creepy vibe. I said to Janice, if that house isn't haunted, it damn well should be, hence the title. Anyway, we wandered off down towards the stores on the main street, and our first port of call, as it usually is, was a music store that doubles up as a paranormal style shop too, or it could be the other way around. Anyway, they do both really well. We had already met the owner of that store, Paul, and we asked Paul if he knew anything about the house that we just noticed. And it turned out that yes, he knew about the house, he knew the owners, and he knew it was haunted. So the owners were Michelle and Frank. Thanks to Paul, we got to meet Michelle and Frank at the house, and they told us all about its history and its hauntings. The audio that you are about to hear is from that first meeting. Enjoy. Janice began the conversation by asking Michelle whether the activity picked up at any particular times.
Do you notice it more like around holidays, like when family's here, or so?
No, it's really just
kind of sporadic.
So sporadic.
Okay.
A definite uptake whenever both of my parents passed. They passed within 18 months of each other, and from the day my mom, she passed first, and it was 2019, I think, 2018, December 26th of 2018. And from the day she passed, and she was buried on January 3rd, there was a lady humming in the house.
Wow.
I would hear this soft hum. It wasn't Mom, but I could hear her. And the day we buried her, I didn't hear it anymore. Then my dad passed away in August of 2020. And I was up here for the funeral, came back up, brought him up, because he was living with us, and I brought him back up here for the funeral, because we weren't living full-time quite yet.
Yeah.
And there was that humming again, and that time I smelled flowers along with it. And I've got a picture or a video where I've got goosebumps. I mean, I've never had that happen. The hair was standing straight up in the middle of August.
Right.
So you don't think the humming was your mother? Mm-mm. Would it have been your granny, maybe?
I don't know.
No.
I never heard my mom's mom hum.
Right.
And my dad's mom passed away when my dad was younger, long before I was born. But we do it. I just don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you said the place used to be a funeral home?
No,
Is it? Oh,
that's across the street.
Oh,
no.
right, okay.
It was a tuberculosis hospital.
Okay.
But they would have viewings in my office that we do know.
Yes.
Yes, because that was a tradition back then.
Yes.
Was to have
right.
the families.
Yeah, so and it may not even be family. It may have been somebody in the community, and the owners here offered, this space, which we think, based upon how it's laid out.
When we go in there, you'll see.
In and out thing.
It had the front and back door on his
Oh, right,
office.
so they can just kind of pass through.
And
That's going to leave a mark.
but I don't know if it was if it doubled as like a butler's place. I mean, she knows more about the history of the house, but I don't know if they had a staff working for them.
They did.
Okay.
But at least in the 1860s, up into the early 1900s, there was staff.
Okay, so possibly it was used as...
Except when it was a TB hospital, because then it was physicians and nurses. And
So when was that? Do you know the date?
around 1905 to around, I know it was started in 1905. I'm not sure when it ended, so I think 2 or 3 years.
At this point, the conversation, as it was more of a conversation than an interview, to be honest, the conversation sort of veered off into UFO territory because they actually live under the flight path of the Lebanon UFO, the famous Lebanon UFO case of 2000, which we hope to come back to in a later episode. But this was just a brief piece of conversation about it. I should just add that I'm trying to protect Michelle and Frank's privacy, but I would say that when Frank's talking about the UFOs, for example, which he's about to, he's not just some random guy talking about what he's learnt, he's picked up from the internet, like maybe most of us have, to be honest, but he's speaking from some experience. Both he and Michelle have got long, glittering careers behind them, and they're private about that, so I won't say any more. I'm just trying to tell you that he does know what he's talking about. There were at least 3 towns, weren't there, that actually saw this thing. Policemen from different areas who all saw it. Right? This is the only town that sort of embraces it and accepts.
We just
that
had
it
an
happened.
alien fest.
Yeah, I think you'll find when you have a lot of reports of UFO encounters, you'll have law enforcement, because law enforcement, they're out on the road. They're not like firemen who stay in their thing and then call out.
Yeah.
So we're always out running around looking and stuff. And they'll corroborate a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, I think mostly it's the military doing what they need to do, testing their area. But see, Scott Air Force Base is not like a little test area or anything like that. All that stuff is out in Arizona, New Mexico. Because you have
That's
lots of
where they
desert.
test it. Yeah.
Not many people out there. You can do very low altitude, high altitude, and so I think predominantly most of the things are explained away from the military, and they're not gonna they're not gonna say anything about it, because it's, I mean, if you think about like the B-2 bomber, it almost is so stealthy, it almost looks like a hawk flying on the side. I mean, that was being done in, I think, the 90s, maybe late 80s.
Yeah, before they came out on the admitted.
Oh yeah, so who knows
the
military is always going to deny it. Well, we don't know. We looked at it, we couldn't.
That's like Scott's Air Force Base was actually approached when this happened. I think it was 2000. I think it happened. And they said, "Oh no, we didn't have anything up. It's nothing to do with us." At this point, something strange happened. Michelle was going through some documents talking about the history of a property, and she mentioned a Mr. Williams who had once owned all the land around the property. And as she mentioned his name, shortly afterwards, or rather as Janice repeated the name, I think it was, you can hear this really strange anomaly. I have no idea what that was. Immediately after that, everyone's batteries started draining just really suddenly. Now, I was on 4 bars, I know, because I'd looked sort of slightly before, and I was suddenly down to 2 bars on my task, and you'll hear the conversation. Everybody's losing power rapidly.
We happen to be on the very edge of the Williams district, so it would make sense.
Mr. Williams.
Stop it. I don't know why my phone keeps crashing, closing my Word documents down. It needs to stop it.
Battery okay?
2
The phone
bars.
is not cooperating.
Down to 2 bars already.
Yeah, they do that.
Yeah, my phone this one is draining left and right.
Yeah.
It's a year old.
Yeah.
And right now it won't let me open up the Word document that shows who owned everything.
Yeah.
I can tell you who owned it in 1866, and I can tell you
Perfect. We'll
that
take
is
what we have.
because I know this by heart. So
Yeah. Okay.
the Bernays family, so it's Bernays.
Okay. Thank you. I was gonna spell it like the sauce.
George was the father, and Mina was the mother, and their children. I have all their names.
Okay.
Because we have a picture. I have one of the books that one of the children wrote. She talks about living in this house.
Oh my gosh.
And it's autographed by her brother.
That is so cool.
So they owned it from like 1866 to about 1876, 1877.
Wow.
They were related to Sigmund Freud's wife. They hung out with Karl Marx.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But they were very proud Americans once they moved here and ended up knowing Lincoln.
Wow.
So they
Well
have
connected people.
Yes.
Yeah, well, just one of the daughters was just so prolific. Really a prolific female for her time. It's just amazing.
She, yes, in the late 1800s, she was a reporter for the St. Louis Globe.
Wow.
And she was international. She traveled and did the international journalism.
That's amazing for that time.
Yes.
What was her name? Do you know?
Thekla, Thekla. Her parents were German Jewish.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah, but I do have the whole. I can tell you the Piesel. I can tell you who owned it after the Bernays,
Okay.
and I don't know if anyone was in the middle.
Okay.
Because if it was so brief. Let me think of his name. Henry.
Oh.
Henry Sider.
Oh.
A cider?
Seiter.
Okay.
And he was actually big in politics. I can't remember if he ran for senator, but he owned a bank and it ended up going bankrupt, and he sold the house to pay everybody back.
Oh, wow. That's, amazing.
Then it went to the Piesels, and they were the musicians. So, I can just keep rattling off for you. Most of them I know. His son Arnold traveled the world performing.
Yes.
Played for the symphony. They composed music on the third floor.
Right.
Yeah, well,
So I
Amazing.
did find in research, because everybody said, they're related to Bach. And in digging around, they were not related to Bach. Their family member wrote pieces that Bach ended up taking. When I dug around and looked, I'm like, but then the family's name was spelled Pezold, but they had been, the husband and wife had both been the writers for Bach, so they would sit and transpose his music and do all this for him. And of course they wrote their own stuff, which he had ended up stealing. He stole a piece of their music, and I've got that all someplace.
Stealing or incorporating? I mean, there's a big difference.
Apparently flat out stealing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Those in the gate file.
Yes.
I apologise for any sniffles. If that was most likely me, I have a bit of a cat allergy going on.
It seems that although this is a small town in the sort of middle of nowhere sort of thing, it's not really big, and it wasn't back in those days, because I've heard Charles Dickens came here.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you know much about that?
He stayed here for a little bit. I mean, he stayed in a
Mermaid
little
House.
farther down past the traffic light.
Right.
I mean, but he stayed for a little while. Just
A couple days.
Oh, okay.
He was very fed up with being in the United States by that point. And he hated Belleville. He hated East St. Louis. He hated all of those areas. He got here and he goes, this is the first place that
He's felt at home.
I felt at home. And but we do have, the festival every year.
And they all mingled, obviously, artists, musicians, writers. They're all part of the same crowd,
Yes.
In this next short piece, we are talking about Michelle's sighting of Frank's mother after she had passed, but I've had to edit this piece a few times because of Frank's private business.
You said that you saw Frank's mother. Obviously, Frank's mother had passed.
Yes.
I'm just saying that for the audience.
This is, yes.
So have you seen her or anybody else? Did you see any full-bodied apparitions generally?
Not generally.
No, but you do occasionally just get glimpses.
I do on occasion, but it's not a typical thing. It's like Frank's mom appearing there was a definite reason for that one.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I going to tell him? How am I going to tell him this? And he was like, okay. He didn't question it. It was okay.
Yeah. Was it very, very quick? Like
it was very quick,
and you
less than 5
really
seconds.
Sure whether you've seen it or not?
No, I knew I had seen it. There was that one. I was like, all right.
Was that here in this room, or was that in
this was down in our Arkansas house.
Oh, right.
She had appeared from the knees up, and she was wringing her hands, and she looked very concerned. And I said, Frank, and this is in the afternoon. It was not at night. It was like 5, 6 o'clock.
How you're describing that is very. It makes a lot of sense, because my mom would do this.
Frank is wringing his hands like his mother used to do when she was worried about something.
But she also had diabetes, and she had both her legs at the end, amputated at the knees. So You to say that, it's weird. Doesn't surprise me.
We were sitting at the dinner table. I was facing where the fireplace used to be. So windows would be on to my right, and Frank would be facing the windows, and we had an electric fireplace right here. She just all of a sudden appeared, and I was like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, you're going to think I'm crazy. And he goes, probably not. And I said, I think I just saw your mom. And he goes, what was she doing? He just didn't bat an eye, kept eating, and I said, well, and I described what she was doing, and he goes, well, I went to the doctor today.
That, and you never met my mom, too.
Yeah, I had never met his mom.
You didn't know about the legs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I knew she was a double amputee. I did not know that she would be, how she would be standing like this.
Yeah.
But it didn't register with me why she didn't have the bottom, why she didn't have full legs. That didn't register to me either.
The conversation continued with stories about visitors to the house and people working on the house, the odd things that had happened to them. When you have visitors like ourselves come here occasionally, do they ever, and say you've not mentioned any of this stuff to them, do they ever say to you, oh, something weird happened to me just now in such and such a room?
Yes, my contractor, Colin and Greg were here. So our contractor's Greg. Colin works for Greg. And Colin comes in and he goes, hey, when did Michelle get in town? And Greg goes, she's not in town. And Colin goes, no, for real, man, when did Michelle get in town? Greg goes, why? And he goes, because I just heard a female voice and a door slammed on the second floor. And Greg goes, Colin, she's not in town. Colin's like, man, I am out of here. Greg goes, they are not going to hurt you. They've been here all this time.
So he stayed? He
did stay. Well, it took Greg a while to get him back in, but yeah, he did stay. My friend Barbie, she took care of the house whenever she and her husband come up when the weather changed. They would check the water and everything. And apparently they really got a kick out of her reaction to things because she would walk through the house and doors would close behind her. And so she would be like, screw you, assholes. And she goes, I go through the next room and slam again. I said, well, yeah, you just called them assholes. And she goes, I know.
You
but
made them mad.
She's like, it happened every time she came in here. And my friend Kim routinely has stuff happen to her. Is
she your friend who's sensitive? I know you mentioned
No, she is not.
Okay.
She's not. She walked through here. She comes and stays from Arkansas, spends the night. And I've heard her call out thinking she's talking to us, and when I'm laying in bed in my end of the house and she's on her end, and I can hear her calling out, yeah, come in. And I just lay there and laugh because there's nobody there. And she writes it all down. So we have all of her stuff written down that she said happened. She's the one that was here when the piano played this last time.
Right.
Oh, right, yeah.
No, it's a flat out knock. I'm not going to do it because... Yeah. And then the light turned off out in the hallway. It turned on and then off. So she thought Frank was out there. When she goes down, why Frank would be out there, at 2 o'clock in the morning and knocking on my door? She goes, I thought maybe he was doing laundry and his elbow hit, boom, 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 or the door had kicked open. I'm like, no, hon.
Yeah.
Could you just go back to the one about the piano note being played? Because I know we know it. But,
yes.
Just for the audio. Really.
Well, you said there were 2 separate piano incidences, right?
Yeah, there was...
When you first...
We had just bought the house, and so we brought the kids here. Frank was not here. He was working. And so we had a bunch, not all the kids, but I think we had 3 or 4 of the kids, and their significant others were here with our real estate agent. House was empty with the exception of a baby grand piano, which sat in the front parlor. And we were in what was then called the brown room. Now we call it the gold room. We were all in there. It was cold, and I'm like, well, I just want to know about the baby grand piano. Is it staying or does it go? Because if it's going to stay, that's fine, but I need to make sure then that I sell my piano and make arrangements for it because there's no way I'm going to get rid of a baby grand. And the real estate agent goes, well, I'm really not sure. And it goes, dink. And I'm like, what was that? And my kids were like, my daughter Shelby, she was like, my son Austin goes, whoa. And I'm like, did that piano just play a note? And it plays dink, a different note. And my real estate agent goes, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here. Here's your house, here's your keys, have fun. And Austin goes, I think the piano wants to stay, Mom. And but everybody really made a quick exit then. And I'm like, there's nothing bad here. You'd feel it, This is it was voicing its opinion.
Yes.
Come to find out, I asked the previous owner, And she said the piano was her husband who had passed away, and he was a pianist. It was his great-grandmother's. And she goes, so yes, I am taking it. She goes, but thanks for letting me know that it played.
Oh, right.
That's amazing.
Well, and the second one was the actual piano that's in there
Yes.
now.
Yes, and it's done it a couple of times, but it's so weird. We can't, typically I set the camera up there
It's random.
so I can watch to see. Radagast does it in the mornings and he does it in the evenings if he's going to do it. It's usually not during the middle of the day, and he does the whole key.
Yeah, because he
everything.
walks across the keyboard, you go up and look out the window, and then he comes back. Because you can hear, if he's walking up there, it goes from high to low, and then if he's walking back across it, low to high. So you know. But when it's just one
random, two random keys, a small number. But yeah, Kim and I were in the dining room, or the living room, which is the gold room now, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, the piano played. She's like, "Where's Radagast?" We looked at him. Well, all the animals are in here with us, all of them. She's like, "Oh, get up and come in here," and there's nobody there. There was one instance I had forgotten about. I play trumpet with my friend Mike, and we were in the living room playing, and we stopped playing, and we were sitting here, and classical music started playing in the parlor. You could hear it. It was a symphony playing in the parlor. And Mike's like, what the heck is that? So when we got in here, it sounded like it's coming from the radio, but there's a Google Mini in there. It had turned itself on and onto a classical station.
At that first meeting with Michelle and Frank, we arranged for our friend Ken Ramola to visit the property with us. Ken, also known as Monster Paranormal, is well known and respected in the Midwest paranormal community. He does all the usual investigative stuff with various bits of technical wizardry, but importantly, he also has a natural ability to kind of tune into his surroundings. This enables Ken to pick up on impressions of unseen beings who may be present too. He has a proven track record in that regard. He puts his trust in those impressions and not in prior research, and we were all very careful to not mention any known activity or names etc. associated with the house in his presence. He much prefers it that way. Ken is putting together a report of his findings on that visit, although he has already told us about a few things that happened that night. For example, on arrival at Michelle and Frank's house, he felt there were at least 3 entities in the house with us, 2 female, 1 male. And there were likely others hanging around too, either afraid of us or perhaps just curious. I'd probably go for the second. We will do a follow-up episode later to tell you more. After the initial meet and greet in the dining room that night, Ken, Janice and myself all set up audio equipment, and we left the house to go to a local restaurant for about an hour. I left a Tascam recorder on the second floor. On going through it over the next few days, I found a few anomalies, including the little clip that I will play for you in a moment. You will be listening to the cleaned up audio. The quality was greatly enhanced by my friend Larry Wilson, who is far more experienced than me at this ghost hunting stuff. He goes out under the name of Urban Paranormal Investigations. The result was pretty good. It sounds to me like a man entering the property and calling out to a friend or perhaps a family member. Larry, as anyone in the Midwest paranormal community knows, is a brilliant paranormal investigator, and I don't say that lightly. He was a private investigator during his career, and he's brought those skills to his passion for paranormal. Larry's written several excellent paranormal books, and he's appeared on a few TV shows too. He does most of his investigations alone, in some very creepy locations. He's had several very scary moments too. We will be interviewing Larry at one of his regular investigation spots very soon for the Cuckoo Town podcast. You really don't want to miss that one. We would like to give a huge thank you to Michelle and Frank, who so kindly let us visit and investigate their beautiful historic home and answered all our questions on its hauntings and history. Further thanks to our talented friends Ken Ramola, also known as Monster Paranormal, and Larry Wilson, also known as Urban Paranormal Investigations. A huge thank you to you all.
You've been listening to Cuckoo Town, a Leviathan Media production. Copyright Mark Anthony Wyatt, 2022. The cuckoo song, written by Michael Pretorius over 400 years ago, was performed by Mark with a brief intro from Clarence Ashley. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, share, save us to your favorites, and all that good stuff. Oh, and please don't forget to tell your friends about Cuckoo Town. Find us on all major podcast platforms.
Thanks for listening. See you next time when we'll take another stroll down a road less travelled. Be lucky.
Be lucky.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo until the 4th day of July. Jack-a-damer.